Interesting, isn't it? How the unions have got all hot and bothered under their collective collars about the Supreme Court ruling with regard to men being given access to female-only spaces. Their collective intake of breath and the speed with which they've sorted out a demo in London this Saturday, when they can do nothing much else at any sort of speed, including bringing in the rubbish and driving the trains. But they can get out there in central London with professional posters, I'll bet. I haven't seen them, but I wouldn't be at all surprised, within 24 hours of the breaking news. It's almost as if they were being, well, directed in some way, isn't it? I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Rumble and Minds. I'm also on Gab and BitChute, which are blocked for the UK, but if you have a VPN, that shouldn't be a problem. The Supreme Court issued what they call a clarification of the Equalities Act 2010, an act which made it illegal to discriminate against a list of minority groups. Until last week, this law was more and more being interpreted as a law that allows, well, actually requires male rapists who say they identify as female to serve their sentences in women's prisons, or allow bearded men in frocks to cause despair and alarm in women's changing rooms in hospitals and shops, or indeed for boys to use girls' lavatories in schools. And it interests me that the first organisations to snap into action when this attack on women was taken down by the new ruling or interpretation, it says here trans protesters to descend on London and Edinburgh today in rallies against the Supreme Court ruling, and trans rights protest in Parliament Square this Saturday. Get the details here. This is from an organisation called Attitude. Now, we have here the anti-capitalist resistance transmission. Supreme Court UK backs bigots and transphobes. So women who are in prisons, they're bigots and transphobes, or women who find themselves being spied on by men under the partitions in a women's changing room. Well, they're just bigots and transphobes, aren't they? This is another one. This is workers' liberty. Trans women are women, trans men are men. There's the poster. And I just want to zoom in on this. Now, this is a bigger one, but it's not that clear. I do have an earlier poster which has far fewer participating groups on it. So I got this yesterday. That's the anti-capitalist resistance, apparently. I think this is called the Workers' Liberty Organisation. They have two Unison branches here, and Front for the Liberation of Intersex, Non-Binary and Trans People, with, of course, the obligatory Palestinian flag. I don't know what that is, but it's got porn on it. Transaction for Housing Justice, Revolutionary Socialist 21, Transaction. I don't know what this is. But then this is today's poster, and now they have Unison and Equity and London Renters Union, and there was another, there's Unite there. So overnight they have succeeded in gathering a whole lot more in the way of support. So that looks like a full-fledged but extremely, just generally a communist type of set of organisations, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not suggesting that Equity is a communist organisation, but there are quite a few of that type. Sort of interesting, isn't it, that the type of people who are demonstrating for this are the type of people who put a Palestine flag on a trans rights logo. And then there are others like banks. Britain's biggest bank pledges solidarity with trans staff. So Lloyds are choosing transgender staff over female staff. Go on, yeah, trans men are women, aren't they? Yeah, I'm sorry, trans women are women. Right, sorry, I forgot about that. Executives at Lloyds Bank, which counts 1 in 2 British adults as customers, have backed transgender staff. It comes as businesses across Britain wrestle with the implications of a landmark Supreme Court judgment this week that ruled laws against sex-based discrimination should only apply to biological women. And they say it was an unsettling day for trans staff. Here's another thing, an earlier page from Lloyds. At Lloyds Banking Group, we're always proud because for us, Pride isn't a month in the calendar. It's an all-year celebration of sexualities and identities. Look, when I'm putting my money in a bank, I just want to know they're going to deal with my money. I don't really want to know if they have some of their staff canoodling in the stationery cupboard or whatever. And when I checked, I discovered that the union with the most members in Lloyds was Unite, which has a dedicated finance and legal sector called Unite Finance. A couple of years ago, by the way, Unite got a major bonus for an organisation called, I swear, I haven't made this up, an organisation called the Lloyd Socialist Party. And they got a bonus or something like £1,000 each for staff that were from this Lloyd's Socialist Party at Lloyd's Banking. Then there are the teachers' unions. So let's just have a look at what the teachers' union have to say about this.
I think there is clarity in the Supreme Court's decision in their ruling, but what there isn't is clarity about what the implications are for day-to-day policy and practice in our schools and colleges. And what we've said and what we're calling on the government to do is to bring that clarity to bear.
Just a minute, what he's saying is that teachers now don't know what to teach about transgender. I have a suggestion. Why don't you stay off the subject altogether? It's not your place. You teach geography, history, maths, English literature, physics, chemistry. You stick to those things. And stop talking about transgender. And then that's as much clarity as you need. But that's just my poor opinion.
Teachers, the length and breadth of the country, are now scratching their heads thinking, well, what does this mean for our setting? What does this mean for our school or for our college? Not just with regard to our students, but with regard to...
What it means is, don't let boys use women's toilets. Or girls, sorry, don't let boys use girls' toilets. That's what it means.
To the workforce as well in our schools and colleges.
OK, and what Helen Joyce says, if they are, scratching their heads about this, it's because rampant disinformation was allowed to spread through the education sector. And it's really not tricky. All children are boys or girls, and no boys should ever be treated as girls or vice versa. That's the only way to protect everyone's human rights and to keep all children safe. Right, and now let's have a little listen of what happened in Rye College a year ago. These are 13-year-old pupils. I've just been listening to this and it's not really that clear. And if you're just listening and not reading the subtitles, you might be having difficulty understanding. So I'm going to repeat it. So the teacher... It starts off here. Obviously, there'd been some discussion before, and then one of the kids started recording. And it's obvious that somebody had said that there are only two genders. And the teacher says, how dare you?
You've just really upset someone. Saying things like should be in an asylum.
Saying things like should be in an asylum. Obviously, one of the kids had said that there's some sort of mental problem, and the teacher was straw-manning her.
Asylum.
I didn't say that.
The kid said, I didn't say that. I just said.
I just said if they want to identify as a cow or something, then they're like genuinely unwell.
If they want to identify as a cow or something, then they're genuinely unwell. Yeah, they're crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy.
You were questioning their identity.
And the teacher says, you were questioning their identity.
I wasn't a question. I was just saying about the gender.
And the kid says, I wasn't questioning. I didn't say anything about them. I'm talking about their gender.
I didn't say anything about them.
But where did you get this idea from that there's only two genders?
And then the teacher says, where did you get this idea that there are only two genders? And the kid says, I just said my opinion.
I just think it's my opinion. That is my opinion. If I respect their opinion, can't they respect my opinion?
If I respect their opinion, can't they respect mine?
It is not an opinion.
Yes, it is.
And the teacher says, it's not an opinion.
It's not an opinion.
There's only two genders. Loads of people think there's only two genders.
There's only a boy and a girl.
Literally. There's no other private part.
And then another kid says, there's only a boy and a girl. There aren't any other private parts.
Gender is not linked to the parts that you were born with.
And the teacher says, gender isn't linked to the parts you were born with.
Gender is about how you identify.
Gender is how you identify.
Which is what I said right from the very beginning of the
I just don't
lesson.
agree with
Which is what I said from the very beginning. And then the kid said, but I just don't agree with that.
yeah. So why should I have to listen to them? I don't agree with?
Biological sex, there is actually three biological sexes.
The teacher says there are three biological sexes because
You can be born into.
you can be born into sex. Now, about 0.5% of the population is born with what look like what are called ambiguous genitalia. But when that happens, one of the sets of genitalia is not functional, and the other one could be non-functional without some sort of medical intervention. But she's regarding that as intersex.
You can be born with male and female body parts or hormones.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
You can be born with both male and female body parts or hormones. And so one of the kids talking about intersex says that's 3, not 300.
I'm talking about biological sex. In terms of gender, there are lots of genders.
And then the teacher says, well, there are lots of genders.
There is transgender.
There's transgender, there's agender.
There is agender, people that don't believe
People who don't believe they have a
they
gender
have a
at
gender
all.
at all.
Yeah, but you can't have that.
You can't have that. It's not a law.
And the kid says, you can't have that.
Yeah, but it's not a law, but it's our opinion. We just don't agree with it.
And then the kid says, it's our opinion. We think it's all just, if you have a vagina, you're a girl.
If it's all just...
If you have a vagina, you're a girl. If you have a penis, you're a boy.
Yeah.
If you have a penis, you're a boy.
Yeah.
But cisgender is not necessarily the way to be.
And then the teacher says, but cisgender is not necessarily the way to be.
You were talking about the fact that cisgender is the norm. That
And she says, you were saying that cisgender is the norm. But it is the norm. That is the way our entire biological setup has been, set up.
you identify with the gender, with the sexual organs that you're born with or you're with.
So she was saying you either identify with the sexual organs you were born with or you're weird.
That's basically what you're saying.
That's basically what you're saying, she has reinterpreted to the kids.
Yeah.
Which is really despicable.
And that's really despicable, she says.
How? When it's
If I
literally
called
true.
my mum right now...
Well, that's very sad as well then.
How is it?
So the kid says, if I call my mum, and the teacher says, yeah, that's very sad.
How is it?
Loads of people.
And then the teacher says, loads of people
There's
agree
only a
with
small
that.
majority of people who
there's only, hang on, you've got to look at this. There's only a small majority of people who think that. A small majority. This is a teacher who says a small majority.
People who actually think that.
And why do you
Who think that the way these kids think. And then she says, and why do you think we have so many problems
think we have so many problems in the world with homophobia?
in the world with homophobia? So now homophobia has somehow come into her trance. She's all over the place. Yeah, she is actually a complete ignoramus.
Yeah, but
Because
And then the kid says, but that's not homophobia, that's transgender. The kids are brighter than their teacher, by far.
not
Yes,
homophobia,
that's
that's
not
gender.
homophobia.
Yes,
I'm
it
fine
is.
with lesbians and gay people.
The kid says, I'm fine with lesbians and gay.
I've got nothing against it.
Got nothing against
That's
them.
the same.
but gender is
But the teacher won't let go. But gender is, there's a link between it in you're saying that people, look, I'm just reading what she says. I'm not saying it makes any sense.
is a link between it, and you're saying that people
There
can't
isn't.
change.
No, they
Can't change who they want to be, says the teacher. And then the kid says, no, they can't. They can't.
They want to be.
They can't. Unless you get
Unless you get a penis attached.
a penis
wrong.
attached. No, I'm not.
You're
And the teacher says, you're so wrong. And the kid says, no, I'm not. And then the teacher says, you're confusing sex and gender.
confusing sex and gender.
No, I'm not though. Because if
Yes,
you have a
you are.
vagina, you're a girl. If you have a penis,
If you have a vagina, we're going on that again. She's just going through the basics of biology.
Yeah, you can't have a vagina and be a girl, but then
Gender
unless you
identify
get
as a
surgery, even then, because you've got those
how
genes.
you
And then the teacher says, gender is how you identify.
identity,
I
how you
don't agree with
identify.
it.
Yeah,
It's
listen.
not an opinion.
And she says, it's not an opinion. And then the girl says, yes, it is.
Yes,
We're
it is.
expressing this
Yes,
thought.
it is.
No, it's not. And if you don't like it, you need to
And then the teacher says, no, it's not. And if you don't like it, appeal to authority here, you need to go to a different school. Right, that's her way of ending the argument.
go to a different school. So
I did go to a
I'm
different
reporting you to
And I'm reporting you to Miss Willis. I'm assuming that's the principal of the college.
Miss Willis. You need to have a proper education.
You need to, so now she's just appealed to authority again. You need to have a proper educational conversation.
Conversation about equality, diversity and inclusion.
About equality, diversity and inclusion, because I'm not
Because I'm not having that expressed in my lesson.
having that expressed in my lesson. So that's where the argument goes. Shut up. And I'm reporting you. Right, and I tried to find out what happened to these girls, and they were either suspended or expelled. And the teachers said that that happened to them because they'd recorded without permission, not at all because of their opinions. So that's the schools. And we all know about what's happening in the NHS as well. A subscriber sent me, now do I have that here? He sent me a whole correspondence list about money wasted on an LGBTQ plus thing, poster or whatever, signpost, on a road crossing from a hospital car park. Now, you know, those things cost money. It's made of metal. It's got to have a post. The post has to be properly anchored. That has to be tested to make sure it doesn't blow away in the wind and slice somebody's head off or whatever. So that thing cost a substantial amount of money, and the NHS is complaining it doesn't have enough for a new scanner. I'd talk about the whole correspondence here, but it's just so long and complicated. I don't have the time, and I doubt that you have either. The point I'm edging towards is all this transgender stuff. It's destabilising our society, isn't it? This guy was right when he said he didn't know where they stood. I said that myself when I went through the protected groups in my last video. about it. There's a clash between discrimination on the basis of gender reassignment and women's rights to single-sex facilities. And I'm starting to wonder if this uncertainty isn't deliberate. Look, in the 1960s and the 1970s, you'd get sort of general ideas of old colonels snorting into their whiskey and sodas in their club, grumbling about the Soviets having union bosses in their pockets in an effort to destroy British industry. But now, recent revelations have shown us that indeed some union bosses were, well, some of them were actually getting paid by the Soviet Union, and certainly many of them were doing it pro bono because they believed in the Soviet way. And now I'm wondering if any other foreign governments aren't encouraging, guiding, or directly ordering union organisers to do the same thing, this time with nonsense like transgender rights. Let's just get back to this emergency demo. This is Workers' Liberty Org, and just look at the number here. And as I said, I had another one where there were even more participants. So they're all boarding the bandwagon, aren't they? And I'm wondering if this is something to do with eating away at our society. It's just a thought, but it's funny. I'm sorry, I was having trouble with this cookies thing here in the way, but it's funny how all these unions are, most of them are quite hard left, and they're all pushing this idea of transgender rights. And this whole transgender rights thing has become a means of bullying women. And of course, you know, Islamization is also a way of bullying women. And I'm just wondering if it's all this stuff here are various unions, some of them very hard left indeed, and they are all to do with bullying women, really. Not the unions, but the transgender rights business is to do with bullying women. And the rape gangs, they're again about making women insecure. And, perhaps I'm falling into pareidolia, but it looks like somehow our society is being got at, starting with making women feel insecure. They are, after all, something slightly more than half of the population. And, well, I don't know. There's something very strange about all of this. I mean, unions are supposed to be for workers' rights, and I'm quite sure that most, like Unison and Unite, have far more biological women than trans people. So if somebody can come up with a logical explanation for this, I'd love to know about it in the comments, please. All right, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.